They spoke about your looks in private, but the truth will shock you. My beloved child. Listen carefully, because what I am about to reveal is not something people say out loud, not something they admit openly, and definitely not something they tell you to your face. Somewhere, behind closed doors, in quiet rooms, in hushed voices, they spoke about your looks. They smiled in public and nodded politely, but in private they measured you with cruel eyes and careless words. They thought you would never know. They believed their opinions would stay hidden forever. But here is the truth that will shake you. The way they spoke about you had nothing to do with your face, your body, or your presence. It had everything to do with fear. Fear that you carry something they cannot understand. Fear that your existence silently exposes what they lack. They noticed how you walk into a room without asking for permission. They noticed how your silence feels heavier than their noise. And instead of understanding it, they chose to judge it. This is where the story really begins. They never criticized you because you were weak. They criticized you because something about you disturbed their comfort. They noticed how your eyes do not beg for validation. They noticed how your posture does not apologize for taking space. And that unsettled them. When people talk about someone's looks in private, it is rarely about beauty or ugliness. It is about power. They sensed a quiet authority in you, even when you said nothing. They saw that you do not try too hard to impress, and that is dangerous in a world addicted to approval. So they tried to shrink you with words, hoping their opinions would make you smaller in your own mind. But here is the shocking part they never realized. Every time they whispered, every time they laughed, every time they judged, they were unknowingly revealing their own insecurities. You became the mirror they were afraid to look into. What they truly discussed was not your appearance, but your presence. Presence is something you cannot fake and cannot steal. It is felt, not explained. They saw how people listen when you speak, even softly. They saw how attention bends in your direction without effort. That kind of presence cannot be purchased, taught, or copied. It is earned through self-respect, inner battles, and silent growth. And this is why their words became sharper when you were not around. Because your presence reminded them of the version of themselves they abandoned long ago. The truth that will shock you is this. If you were truly insignificant, they would not talk about you at all. Silence is reserved for the forgettable. Discussion is reserved for the impactful. You were never the joke. You were the threat. They underestimated the effect their words would have on you. They assumed you would break, doubt yourself, or slowly fade into the background. They believed criticism would rewrite your self-image. But they never understood one crucial thing. You have already survived battles that changed you at a level their opinions could never reach. While they were busy judging surfaces, you were building depth. While they were counting flaws, you were developing strength. And unknowingly, their negativity became fuel. Every hidden comment sharpened your awareness. Every private laugh strengthened your detachment. You stopped needing approval because you saw how cheaply opinions are formed. That realization alone placed you miles ahead of them. This is where the balance shifted, silently but permanently. And now comes the part that changes everything. The same people who spoke about your looks in private are the ones who will eventually question themselves when they see how far you go. They will replay their words in their minds, not with pride, but with regret. They will realize too late that they misjudged someone who was never meant to stay small. You were not designed to fit into their narrow definitions. You were designed to stand apart. And this is the truth they never expected you to discover. You were never being evaluated. You were being revealed. Understand this deeply, and let it settle into your bones. After they spoke about your looks, something strange happened inside them. Silence did not bring them peace. It brought them restlessness. Because once a person judges you in private, they unknowingly bind their attention to your journey. They start watching without admitting it. They start tracking your growth without liking it. Every small win of yours becomes a quiet disturbance in their mind. They notice how you remain composed while they over-explain. They notice how you move forward while they stay stuck in opinions. And slowly, a realization begins to haunt them. You did not slow down. You did not bend. You did not disappear. Instead, you became sharper, calmer, and more grounded. That is when judgment transforms into confusion. Confusion turns into comparison. And comparison gives birth to insecurity. This chain reaction was never part of their plan, but it became unavoidable. Here is what they never prepared for. They assumed looks defined destiny. They believed appearance decides respect. But life does not reward faces. Life rewards consistency, self-belief, and inner alignment. While they were busy forming opinions, you were forming discipline. While they were busy talking, you were building direction. They do not see your private struggles, your lonely decisions, or your silent sacrifices. They only see outcomes. And outcomes confuse them because they do not match their original judgment. This is where their narrative starts collapsing. When reality contradicts belief, the mind panics. They begin questioning themselves. Not openly, but internally. They wonder how someone they once underestimated now carries confidence without arrogance. How someone they dismissed now commands attention without demanding it. That contradiction shakes them more than any argument ever could. Something else happens at this stage, and it is subtle but powerful. They stop talking about your looks and start talking about your results. Not because they respect you, but because they can no longer ignore you. Your presence forces acknowledgement. And acknowledgement hurts when it arrives late. They replay moments where they could have been supportive but chose to be judgmental. They remember expressions, tones, and comments. These memories do not haunt you. They haunt them. Because growth exposes history. And success has a way of rewriting the hierarchy people once believed in. The truth is brutal yet beautiful. You did not change yourself to prove them wrong. You evolved because staying the same was no longer an option. That difference matters more than they will ever admit. Now listen carefully, because this is the turning point. There comes a moment when they realize their words never defined you. They only defined them. The moment they understand this, two paths appear. Some choose humility. They grow, reflect, and silently respect you from a distance. Others choose denial. They downplay your achievements and cling to old opinions that no longer make sense. But regardless of the path they choose, your role remains unchanged. You keep moving forward. You keep refining yourself. You keep building a life that does not need their validation. This is power in its purest form. Not domination. Not revenge. But independence from external judgment. That independence is rare, and that rarity is what makes you unforgettable. And finally, here is the truth that seals everything. People who talk about your looks in private never forget you. Not because of guilt alone, but because you became proof that they were wrong. Proof stays longer than words. You walked through criticism without letting it reshape your identity. You carried yourself with dignity when it would have been easier to shrink. And that is why your story lingers in their minds long after conversations end. You were never meant to be understood by everyone. You were meant to be remembered by those who doubted you. And that, my beloved child, is a quiet victory that needs no audience, no announcement, and no permission. There comes a phase where silence around you becomes louder than any insult ever was. After the private judgments faded from active conversation, something far more intense replaced them. Observation. They began watching you without realizing they were doing it. Not openly, not proudly, but instinctively. Every step you took forward made their earlier words feel heavier. Every calm decision you made created discomfort in those who once laughed. Because when someone speaks about your looks in private, they secretly expect your confidence to collapse. They expect hesitation. They expect you to slow down. What they never expected was composure. They never expected growth without noise. They never expected you to move like someone who already knows where they are going. And this unexpected strength unsettles people more than confrontation ever could. It forces them to confront an uncomfortable truth. Their words did nothing. You continued. That realization quietly rewires how they see you, and more painfully, how they see themselves. Here is the hidden reality most people never talk about. Judgment creates attachment. The moment they formed an opinion about your appearance, they tied a piece of their attention to your life. They may deny it, but the mind does not release what it once tried to define. So they check your progress. They notice your stability. They observe how you do not chase approval. And over time, confusion replaces confidence in their own thinking. They start questioning their perception. They ask themselves how someone they once dismissed now carries weight in rooms they struggle to enter. This internal conflict grows quietly. Because admitting they were wrong would mean admitting their judgment was shallow. And shallow judgment exposes inner emptiness. So instead, they stay silent. Not because they have nothing to say, but because nothing they say makes sense anymore. Your existence disrupts the story they told themselves, and that disruption lingers. Something powerful happens when your consistency outlasts their opinion. You begin to occupy mental space without effort. They remember details they once overlooked. Your tone. Your discipline. Your restraint. These things were invisible before because judgment blinded them. Now clarity arrives too late. They realize your strength was never loud. It was steady. And steadiness frightens people who rely on external validation. Because steady individuals do not react. They do not explain. They do not perform for acceptance. They simply continue. This is where regret quietly enters the picture. Not emotional regret, but intellectual regret. The kind that whispers at night. The kind that replays moments of unnecessary criticism. The kind that understands opportunity was lost, not because of fate, but because of narrow thinking. You become a lesson they never intended to learn, yet cannot forget. At this stage, the power dynamic shifts completely. They no longer speak about your looks. They speak about your trajectory. They may not praise it. They may minimize it. But they cannot ignore it. And that is the ultimate reversal. Because attention that was once dismissive becomes cautious. Caution becomes respect, even if it is never spoken. They now choose their words carefully around you. They sense something changed. Not in you, but in how they perceive you. You are no longer an easy target. You are no longer a topic for careless conversation. You have crossed into a space where judgment carries consequences. And the most shocking part is this. You did not demand this shift. You did not confront anyone. You did not seek closure. You simply became undeniable. That is influence without force. That is authority without announcement. And this is where the truth reaches its peak. The people who once spoke about your looks in private now carry your image as a reference point. A reminder. A standard they did not expect you to reach. You became proof that perception is flawed and potential is unpredictable. You became the outcome that invalidated their assumptions. And outcomes are unforgiving. They do not argue. They do not explain. They simply exist. Your journey teaches a silent lesson to everyone who once underestimated you. That growth does not ask permission. That confidence does not need applause. That resilience is built quietly and revealed slowly. You were never here to satisfy opinions. You were here to outgrow them. And once that happens, nothing they ever said holds power again. Let this sink in, because this is where the narrative fully turns. At some point, you stop wondering what they said about you. Not because you forgot, but because it no longer matters. Curiosity fades when clarity arrives. You realize their private conversations were never a verdict on you. They were a confession about themselves. You see patterns clearly now. People who build their confidence by judging others cannot survive long-term exposure to growth. Growth embarrasses them. It exposes shortcuts. It highlights stagnation. And when they look at you, they are not seeing your face anymore. They are seeing time. Time they wasted. Time you invested. That difference becomes impossible to ignore. This is the moment you emotionally detach, not out of bitterness, but out of maturity. Detachment is not coldness. It is clarity without noise. Something quietly powerful happens when you reach this stage. You stop explaining yourself. You stop defending your choices. You stop correcting misunderstandings. Because you finally understand something most people learn too late. Your life speaks louder than your mouth ever could. When people judged your looks, they believed surface-level evaluation was enough. Now they see depth unfolding without permission. Depth does not rush. Depth does not react. Depth absorbs pressure and transforms it into direction. You move differently now. Not aggressively. Not cautiously. But deliberately. That deliberate movement signals confidence rooted in self-awareness. And self-awareness is intimidating to those who rely on comparison to feel superior. They sense it, even if they never say it. Here is a truth that almost feels unreal when you first realize it. The same people who once reduced you to an opinion now struggle to categorize you at all. You no longer fit into the box they created. You outgrew it. And when a mind cannot categorize something, it feels uneasy. This unease shows up as distance, as awkward silence, as forced neutrality. They do not know how to treat you anymore. You are no longer beneath them in their imagination, but acknowledging equality would require humility. So they hover in between. Watching. Measuring. Reassessing. This is not your responsibility to fix. This is the natural consequence of underestimation meeting reality. You did not change the rules. You simply played the long game. Now pay close attention, because this is the revelation most people miss. Being talked about in private was never a curse. It was a signal. A signal that you mattered enough to be discussed. A signal that your existence triggered reaction. Indifference is the real dismissal. Attention, even negative, means impact. The difference is what you do with it. You chose growth over resentment. You chose focus over explanation. You chose silence over drama. Those choices compound. Quietly. Relentlessly. And one day, you look back and realize something astonishing. The comments that once had the power to hurt you now feel distant, almost irrelevant. Not because they were harmless, but because you became stronger than the version of yourself they were talking about. And this is where your story stands now. You are no longer defined by how you look, how you were judged, or what was said behind your back. You are defined by how you carried yourself despite it all. You did not beg to be understood. You did not fight to be accepted. You evolved. And evolution changes the entire conversation. Without confrontation. Without announcement. Without noise. The truth is simple and unshakable. They spoke about your looks in private, but what they created was a future where their words no longer reach you. And once you reach that place, nothing said in secret can ever touch you again. There is a moment that arrives quietly, almost unnoticed, yet it changes how you see everything. You realize you no longer need to prove anything to anyone. Not your worth. Not your confidence. Not your place in the world. The weight you once felt from their private words dissolves, not because they apologized, but because you outgrew the version of yourself that could be wounded by them. Growth does that. It shifts the center of gravity inward. You stop looking for reflections in other people's opinions and start recognizing your own shape from within. This is not arrogance. This is alignment. And alignment is powerful because it cannot be shaken by whispers, laughter, or judgment spoken behind closed doors. At this stage, something fascinating happens around you. People sense the change even if they cannot explain it. Your calm feels different. Your silence carries confidence. Your presence no longer seeks permission. Those who once spoke freely about you now hesitate. Not because you intimidate them intentionally, but because self-assured energy demands respect without asking. They feel it when you enter a space. Conversations shift. Tones adjust. Eye contact changes. This is not dominance. This is credibility earned through resilience. And the most ironic part is this. The strength they once questioned is the very thing that now makes them careful with their words. You also begin to understand a deeper truth about human behavior. People often criticize what they do not understand and attack what they secretly admire. Your looks were never the issue. Your independence was. Your self-containment was. Your ability to exist without approval challenged a system built on comparison. That challenge made you a topic. But now, you are no longer a discussion. You are a reference point. A silent benchmark. And reference points are not debated. They are observed. This shift marks the end of external influence over your identity. You are no longer reacting to perception. You are creating reality. Another realization settles in, and it is liberating. You forgive them without needing to reconnect. You release resentment without rewriting history. Forgiveness here does not mean forgetting. It means refusing to carry unnecessary weight. Their words taught you discernment. Their judgment refined your focus. Their doubt strengthened your self-trust. In an unexpected way, they contributed to your evolution. Not because they intended to help you, but because pressure reveals character. And your character endured. That endurance is now part of who you are. Unshakable. Quiet. Real. And this is where your journey takes its final shape. You move forward with clarity, not anger. With confidence, not noise. The past no longer pulls at you. The opinions no longer echo. You understand now that being spoken about in private was never your downfall. It was the beginning of your self-definition. You became someone whose value is not negotiated, whose presence is not questioned, and whose direction is self-chosen. And once you reach this level, the truth becomes undeniable. Nothing said behind your back can ever stand in front of your future. Now everything becomes clear, and clarity is the most dangerous thing of all. You finally see that the opinions spoken in private were never obstacles on your path. They were signposts showing you who to ignore, what to release, and where not to seek validation. When people judged your looks, they believed identity is fragile. They were wrong. Identity, when built from within, is immovable. You did not become stronger overnight. You became stronger moment by moment, choice by choice, especially when no one was watching. That is why their words lost power without making noise. Strength does not announce its arrival. It reveals itself when tested. There is a quiet confidence that now lives in you, and it cannot be faked. You no longer react to sideways glances or subtle remarks. Not because you are unaware, but because awareness no longer demands response. You understand the difference between observation and absorption. You see things without letting them enter you. That boundary changes everything. People sense it. They know their opinions cannot reach you anymore. This is when respect becomes unavoidable. Not admiration. Not praise. Respect. The kind that exists even in silence. The kind that alters behavior without conversation. Something else settles into place at this point. You stop measuring yourself through comparison. You stop asking if you are enough. Enough for whom? Enough by whose standards? Those questions fade because you finally recognize your own authority over your life. You move with intention. You speak with restraint. You choose environments that nourish rather than drain you. This level of self-trust was never taught to you. It was earned through discomfort, misunderstanding, and growth. And once earned, it cannot be taken away by gossip or judgment. Here is the truth that completes the story. People will always talk. In private. In fragments. In assumptions. That never ends. What ends is their relevance. You outgrew the room where their opinions mattered. You stepped into a space where results, character, and consistency speak first. The voices that once echoed in your mind now fade into background noise. Not because they became kinder, but because you became clearer. And clarity is louder than criticism. This is the final realization, and it stays with you forever. They spoke about your looks in private, but you built a life in public truth. You became someone who does not need to be defended, explained, or justified. You stand as your own proof. Calm. Grounded. Unshaken. And once you reach this place, nothing said behind closed doors can ever reopen what you have already healed. Your story does not end with judgment. It rises above it. This is the level where silence becomes your greatest statement. You no longer feel the need to react, clarify, or correct narratives that were never built on truth. When people spoke about your looks in private, they assumed reaction was guaranteed. They expected emotion. They expected insecurity. What they did not anticipate was mastery over self. Silence at this stage is not avoidance. It is dominance over impulse. You have learned that not every opinion deserves a response, and not every misunderstanding deserves correction. That realization frees an enormous amount of energy. Energy you now invest in purpose, not people. Direction, not distraction. What truly separates you now is not success, but stability. Anyone can shine briefly. Few can remain grounded consistently. You became someone who does not fluctuate based on praise or criticism. That emotional steadiness is rare, and rarity creates gravity. People feel it. They sense that you are no longer reactive, no longer easily influenced, no longer available for projection. This changes how they approach you. Even those who once judged you now sense limits. Invisible boundaries that cannot be crossed. Not because you threaten them, but because you respect yourself. Self-respect communicates more powerfully than confrontation ever could.